Hello friends. Welcome back to our channel. Today we are going to watch a fun full horror story. This story is about a brother and his younger sister who goes to a forest for exploring which is very near from her village. Let's begin the story.
The arrival.
Ellie and Theo arrived at the cabin late in the afternoon, after a long drive through winding roads. The place was isolated, no neighbors, no phone signal, just the silence of the woods surrounding them. It was the same cabin their family had visited for years, but it had been a long time since they were last here. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the trees, Ellie felt a strange unease creeping in. She couldn't place it, but something felt off. The trees seemed too still, and the air felt heavier than she remembered.
Theo, don't you think it's a little too quiet here? It feels wrong.
It's just the woods. You're not used to the quiet, that's all. Nothing's wrong.
I don't know, I feel like we're being watched.
You were overthinking it. Let's get inside and settle in. It'll be fine.
The first night.
The night fell quickly, and with it came the complete stillness of the forest. The wind wasn't even rustling the trees. Inside, the cabin felt colder than it should have, even with the fire crackling in the hearth. As they ate dinner in the dimly lit room, Ellie kept glancing toward the window. The shadows outside seemed to move, but when she looked again, the trees were perfectly still.
Theo, I swear, I saw something there. Just for a second. A figure, standing by the trees.
It's just the wind, or maybe an animal. You're imagining things. Ellie didn't reply, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Later, as she tried to sleep in the creaky old bed, the air seemed to thicken, and she could hear faint scratching noises coming from the walls. It was the kind of noise that could be explained away, just old wood groaning or animals, but it unsettled her. She tried to ignore it and closed her eyes, but the scratching grew louder. Then, she heard a whisper. Ellie. Ellie stand up, her heart pounding.
Theo?
She looked over at Theo, who was sleeping soundly in the other bed. The whisper came again, louder now. Ellie. Her pulse quickened. The room felt colder now. The walls were still, but the scratching had stopped. Ellie lay back down, pulling the blanket tighter, trying to convince herself it was just the wind.
The search.
The next morning, Ellie woke to an eerie silence. The cabin was cold, the fire long since gone out. Theo was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. But there was something off about his appearance. His eyes were hollow, and his movements were stiff, as if he wasn't entirely himself.
Theo, are you okay? You look strange.
I'm fine. Just tired. Ellie didn't respond, but a chill ran down her spine. Theo wasn't acting like himself. She didn't know why, but she had an overwhelming urge to get out of the cabin. She asked Theo if they could leave, but he just gave her a blank stare.
Theo, please, we need to go. I don't like it here.
Theo turned to her, his expression distant, as if he was looking through her rather than at her. It's just the forest, Ellie. There's nothing wrong with it. But Ellie noticed something even more unsettling. The air outside had changed. The dense forest around them now felt suffocating, like it was closing in. The trees seemed to sway toward the cabin, even though there was no wind. She grabbed Theo's arm.
Theo, listen to me. Something isn't right. I don't want to stay here any longer.
Suddenly, Theo's grip tightened on her arm, his fingers cold and unyielding. He turned, his face a mask of anger. You're just scared. I told you to stop being so paranoid. Ellie jerked away from him, her fear escalating. She tried to get to the door, but Theo blocked her way.
What's happening to you? Why won't you listen?
But Theo didn't respond. Instead, his head slowly tilted to the side, and a deep, guttural voice escaped his lips, not his own. You should have never come here. Ellie froze. Her brother's face twisted in an unnatural smile, his eyes now completely black.
No. This isn't you, Theo, the Hollow Watcher.
Ellie backed away, her heart pounding. The forest outside was no longer just silent, it was watching. The trees pressed closer to the cabin, the branches like skeletal hands reaching for her. Theo's body took a step forward, but it wasn't him anymore. The voice that came from his mouth was an unnatural hiss, laced with malice. It's too late, Ellie. You're here now. And you'll stay with us. Ellie turned and bolted toward the door. She flung it open, but the forest beyond was not the same. The trees had warped, their bark gnarled like twisted faces. The ground was soft, like the earth itself was shifting beneath her feet. In the distance, she saw movement. Figures, cloaked in shadow, emerging from the trees. The whispering woods had claimed them. Each figure was once a person, but now they were hollow, empty shells, walking aimlessly. Ellie turned back to the cabin, her legs weak with fear. Theo's body, no, the thing that wore his body, was following her, its slow, deliberate steps like an unholy procession. She ran. There was no choice. The forest was alive with whispers now, growing louder, swirling around her like a storm of voices. Ellie, come back. You belong to us. Ellie, come back. You belong to us. She looked back for a few seconds. But then she couldn't.
The endless chase.
Days passed, or maybe it was hours. Ellie couldn't tell. She ran deeper into the forest, but no matter how fast she moved, the forest seemed to shift, always just a step ahead of her. The shapes in the shadows followed her every move, and the whispers never stopped, now filled with a maddening chorus of voices. And then, in a clearing, Ellie stopped dead in her tracks. In front of her stood Theo, or the thing that was once Theo. He was staring at her with those empty, black eyes, and in his hand, he held something shiny, a long, sharp knife that able to see by only Theo, ghosts and Ellie. It is a ghost knife called Dark.
Theo, please. Don't do this. I'm your sister.
But the voice from his lips was cold, hollow. You are already ours, Ellie. You just don't know it yet. The thing that was once her brother stepped forward, and Ellie realized with a sickening realization that the forest had already claimed her, too.
Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.